Financial aid can be so confusing. This is why we do what we do at the Scholarship System and Debt Free Degree Lab. There are so many different terms, types of funding, application forms, the list goes on. In this video, I want to focus on 3 different types of federal student aid. So we're talking about the kind of money that we can get through governments. We want to make sure we take advantage of this because this can be some pretty low-hanging fruit for a lot of families. Now, make sure you hit subscribe because every week we release a new strategy when it comes to working towards that debt-free degree. So maximizing this federal aid is just the beginning. There are so many other strategies, even if we don't even get any federal aid. So again, make sure you hit subscribe so that you don't miss out on that. Hey there, my name is Jocelyn Pearson, founder of the Scholarship System and Debt Free Degree Lab, where we redefine paying for college to help families build strong financial futures rather than ones buried in decades of student loan debt. So we have a lot of different strategies. In fact, our families, we primarily focus with getting scholarships. Again, our families, they've gotten over $10.5 million to date. But a lot of it has to do with combining different strategies. Can we pull this kind of funding and that kind of funding? Can we save costs here? Can we find cash here? So knowing all of the different options out there, families with average students can start working towards a debt-free degree. So that said, today's focus is on federal aid, but there's a lot of different options out there. So again, make sure you hit subscribe. So let's go ahead and dive in. When it comes to eligibility for federal student aid, this is typically based on financial need, though there are some that are based more on your student's credentials. Now, U.S. citizenship or at least eligibility based on non-citizenship, there are typically rules in that regard for this type of funding. They typically have to keep satisfactory academic progress, which is a standard GPA minimum in order to receive this money. They might be required to be full-time or a certain number of hours. So there can be different kinds of criteria to receive this money. Now, if you followed some of my live trainings that I've done, we talk about a family that lost out on a lot of money because they assumed they wouldn't receive anything because a coworker had told them that they made too much, and it's a common story. Please don't fall victim to that. So just know that even if you're a student, even if you guys think that you will not get any of this money, you still want to at least submit the required forms and find out because you may be surprised. So what kind of form do we need to submit? That is FAFSA. So this is a federal application for student aid, and it's completely free. So you never have to pay a fee in order to submit it. It's a .gov website. It typically opens up October 1st of your student's senior year in high school, and then you submit it every year thereafter as long as they're going to college. Now, at the time of recording this in 2023, there is a little bit of a weird year where they're changing up the form, so it'll open up in December. Now, we have an entire FAFSA playlist, so make sure you check that out if you want more info on FAFSA. You should see it somewhere on the screen. We'll also link to it in the description. But again, I want to focus on the different types of money that you can access by submitting FAFSA. And the other thing, don't forget that I mentioned, there's tons of different sources of money out there. So one of the biggest types that we focus on is actually outside scholarships that we can get in addition to federal aid, or that we can get even if we don't qualify for federal aid. So if you want to learn more about how to find those scholarships, I have a free training. Again, we'll link to that in the description, or you can go to thescholarshipsystem.com/free training, and you will learn my 6 steps to securing scholarships, regardless of whether or not you're a student and you receive money through FAFSA. Okay, let's dive into the 3 types. So the first one is grants. We love grants. Why? Because typically a student does not have to pay it back. And a lot of times, as long as they maintain the requirements, they hit the criteria, they just receive the money. So they don't necessarily have to write essays or compete or interview or anything like that. They just get the money as long as they hit the numbers or meet the financial aid requirements for this funding. Now, some of them may require, say, if a student changes their major, they might have to give the money back, or if they drop below full time, or if they drop out of college. So we do want to make sure if we're taking the money out to find out if there are any stipulations as far as requirements to pay it back, and make sure your student doesn't fall into any of those. Now, there are 3 types of grants. So within there, you have federal grants. Most families, you can think of with Pell Grant, and this is based on your family's financial needs, so your family's income. Now, depending on what your family makes each year, they may receive the maximum. I want to say the maximum this year is just over $7,000, and that's for 1 year. But is a threshold of where if your family makes this much or less, they automatically get the maximum, which is nice for families that are low income that know, okay, we're in that bucket, so we're going to get that money. Now, after that income level, it slowly phases out. So again, this is where you don't want to make an assumption that your student can't get this. Now, another type of grant are state grants. So some states actually have grants that they offer. And I will say that in South Carolina, for example, they used to have something called a competitiveness grant. So this was based more off of competitiveness than financial need. So it's not always based on being low income. Now, this also may require your student to stay in state for the money, but that of course can vary state by state. Now, even if your student doesn't qualify for anything from the federal government, they could get the money through the state. So again, this is why we have to make sure that we are submitting FAFSA. Then the third type of grant is an institutional grant. So this is money that is awarded directly through the university or college. And also with this money, most colleges will not even consider a student for it unless they submit FAFSA. Why? Because they have to know your student's financial situation in order to decide whether or not to award the money. So even colleges rely on that form to decide whether or not to give the funds. Okay, so that is just the first category, and we had 3 subcategories within it. Let's get to the second type of financial federal student aid. So the second type is work study. This is something that is also, again, given through submitting FAFSA, and it allows a student to work to earn money to help pay for college. So this is more a part-time job, but the funds come through the government, and it's a guaranteed it's a guaranteed dollar amount as long as the student does the hours. Students for this always make at least minimum wage, and they may earn more depending on what kind of job they're given through work study. Now, if they're granted work study, that doesn't mean that they're already assigned a position, so they might have to go through an application process in order to apply to the actual role at the university for where they would complete their work for the work study money. Now, I have an entire video all about federal work study, so if that's something that your student was awarded in their financial aid package, you can make sure that you check it out. Again, we'll link to it somewhere here on the screen. We'll also link to it in the description. Now, the third type of federal student aid, and this is tough because it makes it sound like it wouldn't have to be paid back, but it does, is our federal student loans. There are 3 main types of federal student loans. You have unsubsidized, subsidized, and Parent Plus loans. All of these, again, you get access to through submitting FAFSA. So some students might get a mixture of these. Maybe they have the maximum need, so they get the maximum allowed for subsidized, and then they'll get unsubsidized for whatever's left. Maybe your student doesn't quite have as much need as others, and so they don't get any subsidized, but they only get unsubsidized. And maybe your family, you have to tap into Parent Plus loans. So there's different ways that universities will offer this. Just a very quick explanation. Again, we have an entire student loan playlist, which I will link to as well. But subsidized is where your student, the interest does not start accumulating until they graduate from college. Really, technically, the government says that they're paying the interest for the student while they're in school. So this is nice because then when they graduate, the money they borrowed is the money they borrowed. Where unsubsidized loans, same as private loans, as soon as they borrow that money, the clock starts ticking, the interest starts accumulating. When they graduate from college, that amount is rolled into what they borrowed, and then they start paying interest on top of that interest balance. So it accumulates, which is not helpful for students. Now, again, unsubsidized loans, they can be offered to students even if they don't necessarily have financial need. Now, the Parent Plus loans, just like it says, are offered to the parents. So this is something that you as a parent would have to sign for, which also means that you as a parent would be on the hook for. We always caution with Parent Plus loans. They can be a very slippery slide and dangerous because a lot of times the dollar amounts are unlimited. So it can be a little scary. So just be cautious whenever we are tapping into that. Now, again, of course, our goal is to help families avoid student loan debt. And so we want to try and minimize this type of federal student aid. And that is why you should definitely check out that free training where I teach you how to get scholarships so that you and your student can get money from outside sources that does not have to be paid back versus focusing on these loans. So comment below, were you aware of these different types of funds that you can receive from the government, from submitting FAFSA? Let me know in the comments. Is there any questions? Are there any questions that you have around those different types of aid? Comment below and then we can make a video on that as well. So that said, I know the financial aid process, it can seem scary and overwhelming. There's so much to know about it, but I hope that this at least gave you a little bit clarity as far as what kind of money you can access by submitting FAFSA. And hopefully now you understand the importance of submitting FAFSA, even if your family assumes that you will not get anything. Don't forget to hit subscribe because every week we release a new strategy for you guys, and I hope to see you in the next video.